Hello, you gorgeous teacher. Lovely to see you. If you're one of my lovely regular listeners, welcome back. If you're a brand new listener, you are most welcome. I'm so happy to have you. Before we get started on the main part, you've probably noticed that if you follow me on Facebook or Instagram, I've gone very quiet. And that's because I've hopped over to LinkedIn. Now, if you're not following me on LinkedIn, my name is Erin O'Byrne. I'll leave a link in the show notes. I just thought I'd try something a bit different. So there's still plenty of content to be had. It's just on a different platform. And if you're not on LinkedIn, I really encourage you to join it because there are so many amazing professionals on there. You're still going to get loads of really good content, loads of tips, loads of support, loads of advice, lots of articles. Like there's so much going on LinkedIn as well. So give it a try. Also, I'm going to start hopefully doing some kind of maybe twice a month teachers clinic. But at the time of this recording, I haven't figured out what the name of it is yet. But I think I'm going to start going live on LinkedIn and basically just, waiting for people to hop on and ask me a question and see if I can, help you guys out with anything. So I'm really looking forward to that. Anyway, that's enough housekeeping for the moment. Without further ado, let's crack on and meet my amazing guest. Enjoy. Hi, this is Erin, and welcome to Everything EFL, my little podcast about English language teaching and other teachy stuff too. Credit and honourable mentions will be given during the episode or in the show notes. Let's crack on. My guest today is an English language coach trainer. His mission is to transform teachers into English coaches. What's the difference, I hear you cry? Well, he's going to explain everything and give you some great tips on top of that. Please welcome my special guest, Csabi Berger. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
You did. That was
Brilliant.
Perfect.
Yeah. Excellent. Welcome to Everything
Not many
EFL.
people do that, so yeah.
How
do
are
that
you?
correctly. I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Would you like to just introduce yourself a little bit further?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Csabi Berger. I've been an English teacher for the last 15 years or so. I started quite early. And yeah, I've been kind of transitioning into a language coach, trying to take more clients as coaches rather than just students. Empower them, inspire them, as well as also do the same, empower, inspire, and help English teachers to transition into language coaching, which I think is the future of education now that we know more about the brain.
I think that's the key word here, isn't it? Brain. So can you just expand on what language coaching is and why it's beneficial to both students and teachers?
So we know that like about 90% of what we know about the brain is basically the product of the last 4 years of research. So it's important for us to look at the learner's brain when it comes to us helping them in ways, supporting them on their language learning journey. So language coaching, in general is basically helping students learn rather than just teaching at them or teaching them, and helping them basically bring out their best potential as language learners. We know that the responsibility of learning is up to the learner. We can do as much as we can, support them with the resources, with our experience and all kinds of activities we design, and just holding them responsible. Very important part of language coaching, but they are the ones who eventually have to be committed enough and go through the learning process itself. Now, why is it beneficial for the teacher? It's beneficial because it definitely brings so much better results in terms of the time invested in it, because there is this element of ownership and element of responsibility there. In my experience, it also results in a higher level of retention, because when students are able to understand that language learning takes a long time, they can reflect on their progress, and they also find ways to understand that they have to lower their expectations. It really helps them stay and keep on learning. Why is it beneficial for learners? Probably for the same reasons as well. They will also see lots of tangible results within a short amount of time, because it's always tied into a goal that we'll talk a bit more about as well. And I'll share a couple of tips on goal setting too, although I know you have an episode on that. I really love that, by the way.
Thank you very much.
So it definitely benefits both because it's about the learning. And many times if you look at like the traditional, school environment that a lot of people see language learning first, that's not exactly what the neuroscience wise term would be for learning, how I would just define learning itself, because learning is about experiencing, and that's what coaching helps with.
So many things to say. I think like traditionally the onus is on the teacher, isn't it? You must create this amazing lesson plan. You must create a student-centered lesson. You must create all these communicative activities. But at the end of the day, if your students aren't into it and they're not motivated and engaged, and they don't really, they just don't have an interest outside of the class in learning the language, they're not really going to have much of an interest in engaging in your lessons.
Yes, totally. And let's not even talk about the fact that they are nervous. So whenever you're nervous, there's no learning happening. And if they can't, they don't know how to manage their emotions, basically, right? To deal with their emotions, ground themselves whenever it comes to like language anxiety. This is a proven thing by research that there is a thing called xenoglossophobia, language anxiety. And if they don't know how to handle it, they're not learning eventually as well.
And I'd say on top of that as well, I think it's very kind of natural to come out of a class going, I'm stupid, I don't know the language, I didn't learn anything because I'm not very good at this as well, I think.
Right. Yeah, this negative self-talk, which is obviously something that is not beneficial for anyone. Yeah,
but it's so easy to do. And I'd say that is in every aspect of life. It's much easier to listen to that negative voice.
It is, because it's the default. It's the default of our brain, right? So this is something I always tell my teacher, coachee, or coach trainees now, that our brain is not designed for language learning. Our brain is designed for helping us survive. And anytime we focus on the negative, that helps us protect ourselves from all kinds of dangers and threats and everything else. And language learning itself is already something strange to the brain itself. So there's lots of threats coming up.
And the point that you made about lowering expectations, it's such an important one as well. Like I tell all my students, like everything is a process, everything, especially language learning. And you have to be patient and kind to yourself about it, and not too much pressure on yourself. And it's such like the antithesis of a lot of language courses. I'm going to do this for 8 weeks and I'm going to get to intermediate, or I'm going to do 8 weeks of IELTS and I'm going to get a 6. And it's like,
And it's just literally where a lot of people spend decades in, like expectations. You need to have some sort of qualification. Everything is about the end result. You have to have some sort of grade. You are evaluated on the basis of your results on a specific day, totally random, instead of focusing on the process itself.
Yeah, and I think and we're going to talk more obviously about language coaching, I think it's such a brilliant way of, teaching, if you like. It's just, how to implement that in most classrooms and institutions where it is all about ticking boxes and having results, but we're going to come to that in a bit, so let's not rush. We'll put a pin in that one. So what to you are the main differences between language coaching and language teaching?
So first of all, I'd like to say that language coaching should never be mentioned as something that's like superior to language teaching, right? It's a branch of language teaching. It's a kind of teaching, extending the meaning of teaching and bringing in the learning part as well, which, to be honest, we look at, all sorts of things we talked about as well. Lectures where teaching is just me speaking, and it's a kind of one-way process. So it's where the learner is the active participant, the one who makes all the decisions about their learning process, because it's their life, it's their learning, right? Their learning journey. And the coach is the one who takes that passive role of supporting, helping, encouraging, motivating, and also stands as the authority who has potentially the knowledge of language acquisition, of how it all works, and can help, guide their coaches' decisions. It's also about what we talked about, the responsibility. The client has 100% responsibility on their side on taking action on whatever they committed to, because it all starts with a contract where people promise to, not to blame the coach on anything that they wouldn't do, which again happens so many times in the traditional classroom. And it's this relationship between the coachee and the coach, which is equal. So it's not more of an instructive teaching environment or learning environment, but where it's more of a reflection and a kind of discussion together, because that's what is, again, not viewed as a threat by the brain. And it's all based on the learner's own needs and interests, which again kind of plays against sometimes when the teacher says, oh, I picked this topic because I think this is going to be so good. I think you would love it, because it's many times the teacher whose interest is brought into the classroom.
Guilty.
Yeah, these are just sometimes I think we are guilty. But yeah, what I can also say is, if you have things that you love, to teach about, to talk about, at least make sure you give a choice.
Yes, absolutely. And that's definitely something that I try and implement in my teaching, or teaching/coaching, whatever you want to call it,
right.
is choice. I mean, even like, who do you want to work with? Do you need another minute? How do you want to do your homework?
Yeah, or what do you want to consult? What do you want to look at? What resources do you need? All these kind of things, right?
Yeah.
Again, it all comes back to like making them feel proud, because the most proud you are of yourself if you do the hard work. It's just like cooking your own food. You will more likely to be, looking at yourself as a proud cook than if someone else cooks something for you. Or we can talk about all kinds of different metaphors about this as well. We are the proudest of ourselves if we climb the mountain, not if we take a jeep or a helicopter. And it's just the same thing about language learning.
Yeah, empowerment.
Yeah.
Do you think that you do a lot of mindset work as well? Is that a big part of it?
Yeah, so it's definitely whatever the coachee needs. So if there is a lot of mindset work that they need to do, sometimes they aren't aware of it, especially, I would say, in my experience in a lot of like Anglo-Saxon countries, things like mindset aren't really talked about that much in the general public either. So they might describe their problems, and it's the teacher's kind of job, right, to recognize them as mindset issues. They might not, nobody will say, oh, I have mindset issues and I need to, everybody wants to like speak like a native speaker or whatever, they come with all these different expectations. But I do a lot of mindset work because I love mindset. I love helping people really unblock themselves, because I always say, what's the point of me teaching more vocabulary or working on their pronunciation if they aren't in the right mindset about whatever it can come up, looking at feedback as a threat, as criticism. It could also be things like, oh, the only option for me is like a one-to-one class, because obviously that's like they are too scared of speaking in front of others. Or other mindset issues can come up as well, which is the necessary thing to make that real progress, instead of the idioms and phrasal verbs and everything else they need.
Yeah, and it's not even just like, I mean, I suppose mindset can be so many different things. I was initially thinking of sort of lack of confidence, but then there could also be the shift in mindset where, I have to learn 10 phrasal verbs every week or something like that. I think people need to get out of that kind of mindset as well, setting themselves these unrealistic goals of learning a list of words.
I mean, there's this idea of the mindset of enoughness, which is in all of us because of the high expectations of the society. You are X if you achieve this, and if you have achieved this, right? So people feel that they are not good enough. And in order for them to be good enough in a language, they need like the 50,000 most common idioms or anything else like that, right? Instead of working on the mindset and lower their expectations. So yeah, actually, what I was going to say is that there's something we call a mindset continuum when it comes to learning a language. So there are basically 8 aspects of mindset itself, and it can range from like your general worldview, like do you actually know or believe that you can learn anything, or you have this fixed mindset where you would believe that everything is set in stone, nothing can be changed, the typical senior students coming in and say, oh, I'm too old to learn anything. If you have these beliefs, core beliefs, you won't be able to make much progress. Or things around feedback. Some people look at feedback as criticism, as a threat to their own existence, especially this perfectionist student type, people who were corrected too much with the red pen, or looking at others, or looking at effort as well. Many students look at effort as something that's an evidence of their weakness or their lack of ability, instead of something that will actually help them grow.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because a couple of weeks ago, I actually overheard one of my managers talking to one of my colleagues, a teacher, about an observation coming up, and immediately she went into like defense mode. So it's not just students. It's like, okay, but are you going to tell me when you're going to come in? Because I tend to panic about these things. So she was instantly, I think, feeling judged because she had to have an observation,
Right.
So I would say that goes both ways for teachers and students.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's also a very important part of the language coach's job, to work on their own mindset, because we don't want to go into the language coaching conversation in a language coaching program and then accidentally, many times, but basically project our own fixed mindset onto our students.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. Going back to what you said about enoughness and sort of pressure students can experience, some of that can be cultural as well, and I imagine in that case it can be very difficult to try and sort of break through that must take time.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it does take time, but at the same time, as long as the coachee knows that it's their own learning journey, they don't have to fit into any sort of other people's learning journey that they have drawn up or they have gone through. Everyone has their own weaknesses and strengths, and your best bet is, if you're aware of them, you work on your weaknesses and you find ways to tap into your strengths, and just understand that culture is just a social construct as well. So just because generations and generations have told you to be perfect in everything, it doesn't mean that it is true. So having that, I wouldn't just say a pinch of salt, but like a bucket of salt.
Interesting. So if teachers are listening and thinking, yeah, I kind of like this idea, but they're not really sure where to begin, especially when they're up against maybe a class, because I think most people who listen to this would be teaching a class, and again also thinking about the box ticking and the syllabus, but I have to do this by the end of the week, and I don't have time for this because I have to do this. What tips do you have so that teachers could just sort of begin a little transition, or just kind of implement these ideas in a very simple, practical way?
First, it would be like awareness raising. Like, I don't think there should be any human being on earth who doesn't know how their brain works. So it's important for them to understand why things are happening. There's actually a lot of research on the fact that if you tell students why things are happening, they are more likely to accept it, and they're more likely to be like to come to terms with some of the issues they need to work on. So awareness raising is definitely the first one. Also to the idea of what I call unlearning. So you might have to unteach first, especially if people come from like this grammar translation based traditional classroom where there is one solution, there is ongoing red pen feedback and pretty negative one, right? There's also something I would always say on the first session before the goal setting, like really try to make sure you look into their learning history. like their learning experience in the past, have what was their experience in the past with previous teachers, because teachers play such an important role in students' own perceptions as well. If a teacher tells you, it actually weighs like 100 times more if a teacher tells you that you are never going to be fluent, compared to when a teacher says, yeah, come on, of course you will be fluent if you work on it, right? So it can have detrimental consequences on people's mindset.
Absolutely.
Right?
And like, even if you think back to your own experience, you'll remember the one teacher who really inspired you, and you'll remember the one teacher who made you feel like crap. You won't remember the other ones, but you'll remember those two.
Exactly. And the subjects that I was learning from them. So that's definitely the first thing. Unlearning. Any kinds of coaching is about unlearning what's not true and what doesn't help. It's never about what is good and what is bad. It's about what helps them move forward, right, towards their goals, and what takes them back or what holds them back from them. Which brings me to goal setting, which you already mentioned in your episode in the past, but I think it's really important for them to understand that the goal setting also isn't about the goal. I always say this is a funny thing, but just like you said, everything is a process, and it's never about the goal. It's about what I'm learning while working towards that goal. And I would highly recommend setting unrealistic goals, which again goes against the SMART goal kind of system. But I'm always trying to look at things, how I can support my students better, right? But if we look at mindset and goal setting, it should not be realistic, because it's never about the goal. It's about the process, which is realistic, but the goal itself should be something unrealistic. That's what's going to bring the best out of you if you don't set goals that are realistic from your personal point of view on day one.
Okay, so are you talking about a long-term goal rather than little things you can achieve every week? Okay, so you have one long-term goal, for example, I'd like to get to B2. But what about sort of more short-term weekly goals, so they feel like they're making a little bit of progress? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I wouldn't call them goals, and I would call them action items, but it's basically the same thing, right? Because goals are goal in general is something we can't really influence, in the sense that whether we reach it or not is not entirely on us. But action items are like, what can I do on a daily or weekly basis so I can reach that long-term goal, right? Which is what I can influence.
Okay, that's interesting, because I usually try and get my students to just set like little goals to get those small victories, but I never really thought of it in the sense of, what is their big goal at the end, because they usually say the same thing. But I tend to focus on the smaller goals. So that's actually an interesting point there.
That's also actually, I would say, a mindset thing. So goal setting is also a kind of personal development issue. So a lot of people aren't really aware of the importance of it. And if people say things like, I want to speak like a native speaker, or I want to reach B2 or C1 level, some people might say, I don't need goal setting. Or I even heard people like, oh, you guys Americans, you are obsessed with goal setting, which is just a sign of someone who is basically scared of failure.
Yeah.
So that's again a mindset thing. When people don't want to set a goal, or they set a very general goal, we can work around this. And also, what does it mean for them? So what does it mean for you to be a B2 speaker? Right? That's like, what is their definition of that? How would they feel? That's also how we can motivate the brain about feelings. That future pacing is a very powerful coaching tool that I always use, because imagination, you can imagine, I'm just saying lemon, and you will taste lemon in your mouth. And it's the same thing about your future, right? So how you feel about this goal in the end, and then connect that to the present, basically manifesting your B2 level, is what is a very powerful tool for a lot of language coaches to use.
Ooh, I'm learning so much. What else you got?
I don't want to overload here with information, but there's so much here. Yeah, so that's definitely the goal setting part and focusing on the process. So it's never really about the goal itself. It's about the action items that I can do. And it can be
Yeah.
as simple as I commit to listening to a podcast episode every day after breakfast, right? Or work on something that is like you can kind of measure it, like 1, 2, 3, or it can be time bound as well, right? But something that is up to you and it's something you commit to because it's you, only you who can work on it, especially if it's a very close to 100% language coaching when there is no teaching itself happening.
Mm. And like in a classroom environment, I would say that reflection on this would be important as well. So possibly having those reflection sessions every week. Did you achieve your goals? If not, why not? If you did, how do you feel? That kind of thing
Yes,
as well.
right. Mm. And understanding that not achieving the goal is not like, because we tend to go into this self-sabotage and say, oh, I'm a horrible person, I haven't achieved my goals and I'm weak and whatever. But it's important to, like, coaching is about the present. The past is something we can't change.
Yeah.
And it's important for them to understand too, not to ruminate on what happened in the past, not to live in the past and feel depressed about things they didn't do, but okay, what can we learn from this? So I
Exactly.
always try to focus on learning. What are you learning from this? What can it prepare you for?
Yeah.
That's what it's all about, never about achieving it.
Mm. And then within all of that goal setting as well, again, it's all about choice, isn't it? Like, I mean, you could have like a big brainstorming session in class about what can we do outside of class, or, here are the choices. But at the end of the day, it's the student's choice. Okay, I think I'll do a podcast, or I think I'll read an article or something like that.
I would also, do we still have time?
Absolutely, go for it. Yeah.
So people love, in terms of explaining lots of things around mindset and everything, people are really they listen to metaphors. Like they are one of the most powerful ways to kind of grab people's attention and to make them understand something that they might not be familiar with. Like I always use the mountain metaphor.
Yeah.
To get to the top of the mountain, right? You need to climb as much as you can, use the map, consult, like a guide, ask for directions, otherwise you will be lost. All sorts of stuff, the whole mountain thing. People can, teachers, coaches can come up with their own system of analogies, and it's a very powerful tool to explain things because it connects the new information to something familiar.
Yeah, I've been using a lot of inspirational quotes in my lesson. And sometimes I say, how can you apply this to your language learning? And sometimes I just say, how can you apply this to your life? But I do like, because it's critical thinking as well, isn't it? They have to kind of decipher it. They have to try and put it into words, and then they have to apply it to something. So I'm so glad we're on the same page here.
It is definitely a long process. And I would say it's also like, I think we're just like in every industry, we are living in a transitional period where there's an awakening happening. And the fact that, societal norms don't necessarily have to be followed all the time. And fluency is a kind of a big thing for so many people because of their beliefs about themselves and the way they look at mistakes and everything else.
Given the power of the coursebook industry and like the sort of industry of TEFL courses and stuff like that, I mean, what does the future hold for language coaching? Do you think it will gradually seep into that kind of those industries? Do you think it will take a lot of time?
So like in the most traditional sense, language coaching doesn't require a textbook.
Yeah.
I don't know how all these big publishing companies would promote the idea of language coaching if it kind of works against them. But I think it's also, in which I'm really trying to do, and I believe that this is what the legacy would be, if we can help students who will then talk about our coaching to other people, how that helps so much more than just simply going to a class and being spoon-fed basically, then it can change so much more. It's that ripple effect that I think if there are more and more coaches, more teachers understanding that teaching, talking at students doesn't work unless they do the work as well, unless they learn, right? So instead of teaching, helping someone learn is or should be the focus for the
Yeah.
future.
But I think also that ripple effect will be very heavily influenced and supported by the power of social media as well. I mean, just looking at the amount of sort of coaching and language coaching courses and things, even over the last year that have popped up, I think that will really help sort of spread the message as well. Because I think more and more teachers are tuning into finding their community on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever.
Absolutely. And we can all learn from each other.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I love about it. So what are you doing now in terms of courses and things that you're offering?
So right now, what we have is an amazing community of English coaches. It's called Engage, and we have a monthly membership, basically helping people who want to dabble in coaching. So it's especially designed for beginner coaches who want to learn more about what mindset is, how they can become coaches, and also the business part of it, how they can market their own coaching as well, because it's a bit different from like, putting up a course and say, I'm launching a course next week as well. So basically empowering, inspiring, and helping any English teacher in whatever they need with business, mindset, and the coaching element itself as well.
And if people are interested or they just want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, currently I'm pretty active on Instagram. So it's at More Than Just Teacher, without the A, where I'm more than happy to, welcome anybody. And if anybody has any questions, potentially about this episode or anything else about language coaching, I'm more than happy to talk in the DMs as well.
Brilliant. And then all your other links will be in your bio on Instagram, will they?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Brilliant. Well, personally speaking, everything made perfect sense to me. I just hope it makes perfect sense to anyone listening to this, but I suspect it will. Thank you so much for your time, Csabi. You're on your travels at the moment, so I will leave you to enjoy your evening in Malaysia. And you'll be traveling to Dublin soon, so we'll actually be meeting in person, which I'm very
so excited already. It's just a couple of weeks. Thank you so much, Erin. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.